hey, life's tough. We get it. That's why we want to help. So that means over the next hour, this service, we absolutely believe that there's going to be something that you can take away that's going to help you this week. And guess what? It doesn't matter where you are in the faith spectrum. And get this, you don't even have to be a Christian to be able to get something out of this, because we believe that Jesus can help you make life better. More importantly, he can make you better at life. And Jesus is the sort of guy that doesn't need you to have a whole heap of faith. He just says, follow him anyway. And guess what? This stuff's for free. Stick with us. The service is about to start. Most of all, we're praying you're going to get something out of this morning.
This morning, I am excited that you are here. You too can scan the QR code. Hopefully you can see it in the shot that we've got here as well, because you get to participate too. So we would love to have some questions come through from online. Scan the QR code and let us know what has been on your mind. Equally, if you have a question, Cara is with you this morning. Feel free to pop that into the chat and she can also help you out. But we would love to hear from you this morning if you are joining us online. It's great to have you here.
Well, good morning. So glad that you are with us this morning. My name is Kristyn, and I have the privilege of being one of the pastors here, and I'm glad that you could be with us. And do not worry, if you haven't actually been with us for this sermon series, it's not like you're going to be left on a lurch. It's not like you're going to not be able to engage with the content. But we just wanted to try something different, try something new. Is this too close to my face? Sorry, Nathan. Anyway, try something different, try something new to wrap up this series, to allow all of us to engage with what God has taught us. And so, is it annoying, the feedback, or is it just me that can hear it just a little bit? Kieran, can I have your mic? Is that all right? Sorry. Thank you. Let's start again. We wanted to be able to wrap up this series to allow us all to be able to engage with what God has taught us, what God is sharing with us, but also allow you guys to ask your questions, because we know in community that's where we grow. And when we can engage with what God is telling us, and where we can engage with maybe what's been prompting in our spirit, and we've got questions, that's how we grow. And so whether or not you're a Christian or not this morning, you can engage with how to talk to God, because that can be one of the biggest barriers about whether or not we want to follow Jesus. And so this morning, we're going to have two people who are going to come up here and be able to somewhat answer our questions. Let's all be honest, none of us are actual gurus. We are all learning as we go. And so we will try our best to answer your questions, but also it might be a moment for you in which you go, oh yeah, that also really stood out to me. So you can also continue to ask your questions. I wouldn't normally have my phone up on stage with me and have it on, but I've got it with me so that I can read your questions. And so we've got lots of good questions coming through. Some of them I'm like, oh, that one's going to be a hard one to answer, but we will give it a go. And the reason why we have focused so much on prayer is because prayer is so vital to us having a relationship with God. Prayer is so vital. You know, with all of your actual everyday relationships, how important is communication? If you want to have a deep personal relationship with someone, you need to be able to communicate with them. As much as my young girls feel like they have a deep personal relationship with Taylor Swift because they can engage with her content, they can engage with what she's going through because they know from her songs and from socials. But to be honest, they don't have a personal relationship with her, do they? Because they don't talk to her. And so it's the same with us for God. We can spend so long reading about him, hearing about him, but until we actually engage in conversation with him, we don't actually know him very well. And so that's why we spent so long. To be honest, the series was meant to just be 3 weeks, and it's gone from 3 to 8. So as you can see, prayer is very vital. And along the way, we were listening to all of you about different questions you had about prayer. And it would be really silly of us to not then answer those questions and engage with things. And just to leave you with 3 tips, which was like the first 3 weeks, which was like, I think I've got them up there, Matt. It's a couple slides down. Sorry, yeah. The ones were adoration, admit, and ask. So that's what we had started with. As you can see, they're all 3 A's. Very Sam-like, isn't it? All 3 A's. And then we realised that there is more to prayer than that. Just leaving each and every one of us with a formula of how to pray doesn't actually help us sometimes in our journey with God. And to be honest, number 1, I'm still stuck on. Like, that has changed my world, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But we then wanted to engage with what actually happens when life happens and when we're talking to God. What happens when God doesn't answer my prayer? What happens when I'm so anxious and I'm worried about everything? Or what happens when I'm doubting about who God is? And then ending with the rest of the Lord's Prayer, leading with temptation at the end. And so that is how we got to 7 weeks on prayer. And then we thought, why not add an extra week? And so this is where we are. Now, you are all coming along on a fun experimental journey. I'm the least technical person in the whole entire world, and I've added an online poll to this in which Sam is very jealous that he's not doing it because he's wanted to do it for ages, and then I've got the privilege of doing it. So I'm going to welcome up our two great panellists. I'm going to welcome up Steph and Eric, who also helped so much with the seats. They had to carry their own seat to then come up. Welcome them down. Yeah, you can welcome them. And I am going to ask a question that I didn't prep you for at all, so be prepared. My question is, can you introduce yourself, even though I've shared everyone your name. Introduce yourself, how long you've been at Northside for, if you can remember. Steph might have a bit of...
And my husband's not here today, so I
Yes.
how long have we been here?
Yes, you'll have to guess. And what is your favourite comfort food? To give you 5 seconds, I'll go first. My name is Kristyn, and I've been here for 16 years. That is a long time, isn't it? And the only reason why I know that is because I came once I married Sam. And that has been 16 years. And my favourite comfort food is hot chips. Absolutely love them. Actually, fun fact, on my very first date with Sam, I was so nervous. I couldn't think of something that I wanted to eat. And so I literally ordered a bowl of fries. And yeah, there you go. Would you like to go first, Eric?
Well, I'm Eric. I've been coming to Northside for 8 years. My favorite comfort food is the popcorn that is salty and sweet.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Yes.
I think you've got some people that agree.
Okay, I'm Steph, and I've been coming here, I always say 7 or 8 years, but Eric, not this Eric. I am married to Eric, not this Eric, different Eric, who is homesick today, so you can pray for him to be healed. And my comfort, this is really hard. I just love food a lot. I think I'm in a constant state of, maybe chocolate.
Oh,
chocolate, yeah.
I do know not lollies. I have learnt that about you in the last couple of weeks.
Not a lolly gal.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing. So we're glad that you're here. I've got some questions that we're going to go through, and then we will also have a look at some of these questions on here, and they are very good. So, the thing is still up there. You can still send in your questions. There's lots of them coming through. Great questions, guys. Okay, so we're going to start with our very first week, which is, as I said, was one of the biggest things that has, I think, changed my personal prayer life, which is starting with adoration. And so the question is how is being intentional with starting prayer with adoration, so starting with claiming who God is, changed how you pray or even what you pray for? And I'm happy to go first, if that's okay. I think that this has really changed my life because I think the whole thing is sometimes when we come to talking to God, we come as if it's talking to a genie and coming with all of our wants and all of our needs and all of our desires and like, please fix this. And a lot of it is like with good hearts and good intentions. But as I have really been intentional about actually declaring who God is and saying, you are wonderful, you are good, and declaring who he says he is in the Bible, my whole thing has changed. And when it comes to the asking bit, I've kind of forgotten what I came to ask for. And my whole perception of life has really shifted. And that has been a real pivotal moment for me. And to be honest, I've still stuck there trying to work that one into my prayer life. What about for you both?
I guess I'm not naturally like a very appreciative person, as in I'm not naturally someone who verbalizes that just in my general day-to-day. So I think for me this has been something that I'm just trying to grow in, not just with God, but just in life in general, whether it is with my family or, friends or things like that, showing that appreciation first, whether it's big or small. I have an example of something as well.
Yes, please share.
I did ask my dad permission to share this, but I think it will help give context for maybe a lot of what I'll share today. So the start of this year, very unexpectedly, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And we were told 50-50 chance whether he would make it 6 months or not, which I thought was really bad probabilities. Others were like, that's a really good chance. And I was like, oh, okay. Anyways, thankfully, grown up in a beautiful Christian home, and the moment we got the diagnosis, aside from the very practicalities of like my dad kicked into gear to tell us like all the things, like these are the state of finances, this is what you need to do, blah, 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 all this sort of stuff, we quickly did a last minute trip as a family. And it was really fascinating, and I think for some context, our family does not do well with medical issues. Like in the past when we've had other things, like it's whole meltdown, like we do not deal well as a family, and thankfully I'm married to a doctor who knows how to keep us chill and in check. But what was incredible, we booked a last minute weekend away, and we spent the weekend actually not even praying for Dad for healing. We spent the weekend in worship. And I would have to say, and you guys have journeyed with us this year on this, that's just changed everything on our perspective of how we've journeyed as a family. And I felt that weekend of adoring God and just reminding ourselves He is so good and just so loving no matter what, like really set the tone. So like I know that's a really big example, but that's the thing that has stood out for me this year, that it was really interesting that we anchored not on like God heal Dad. We were like, God, you are so awesome. You have been so faithful to our family all these years. We can see all the ways you've been faithful to us, and we're just going to trust you.
Wow, that's huge. Thanks for sharing, Steph. Eric, for you, have you added that to your prayer life, or have you seen that, even if it's not been over the last 7 weeks, but over your prayer life journey? How have you seen that play out?
I think for me, I'm a big, the first thing that goes into your head the first time you wake up every day person. And so I've just been really consistent, filling my head the first thing in the morning with some really helpful YouTube videos. And so a lot of those bring my mind to how great God is, and how in contrast, how small the issues that I have seem.
Yeah.
And that kind of just sets me up for the day. If I can have His Word be the first thing that I'm into, then it seems like everything else is in perspective. And I think, didn't Sam make up a word, perspectively?
Yes, I
think
can
he did.
100% guarantee he
But
did.
that of the different sermons, I think that was the one that stood out for me. That we should pray perspectively, which was the sermon on not knowing. And being okay not knowing.
Yeah, which is huge, isn't it? And it's funny how such a simple truth, like there is a beautiful song that I grew up singing, and I'm sure for some of us who have grown up in church maybe have sung, where it's like, turn your eyes upon Jesus and the things of this world will grow strangely dim. And when you're in a hard time, man, that is really hard to do. But it is true, when we turn our eyes to God, His greatness, His goodness makes our things just seem that little bit smaller. Doesn't mean that they're not important. He does still care, and He is listening. And so then when it comes to asking, we're going to focus on the first three first. When it comes to, admitting first is where I skipped that one, maybe because that one was not one that we all want to engage with. But when it comes to admitting, and that's one that Jordan was sharing on, God's intention isn't about shaming us. So when He's like, what in the Lord's Prayer it says, sorry, once again, Matt, you're going to have to jump around with me this morning. In the Lord's Prayer, when it says, and forgive us our debts as we have forgiven our debtors. And so when it comes to admitting to Him, God's intention isn't about us feeling shame, but rather about transforming us. And so why do we think sometimes being honest with God, who does know all, actually can be really tricky? And have you guys experienced that, or is that something that you don't find hard, or is it something that you have found hard and your experience through that?
I don't have a great answer for that. I'm going to pass.
And that's okay.
I think, I was when I was sort of thinking about this, and I was like reflecting on, maybe some of the things that have been really hard to admit through the course of my life. I find often it's been for me about remembering that, like, when God promises that, like, he's forgiven and he's forgotten, as far as the, I'm really bad with, like, verse references, but you know what I'm talking about.
They've all got
Feel
phones,
free
they
to jump
could
in.
Google that.
Yeah. I think it's more often, like, for me to remember that that's the way. Like, it's not that I feel shame to bring it before God, because, like, I know he already knows everything. There's nothing that I can hide from him. But that it's the work that needs to happen in my heart to remind myself that God actually does forget it, even though I remember it. I don't know if that answers it, but that's just something that's been more my struggle than, like, knowing that the love of God cannot, won't be taken away from me just because I've done something really horrible and awful.
Yeah. And I find, like, for me personally, I love to reflect on our relationship with God similar to our most intimate and personal relationships. And so I know in my relationships, particularly in my marriage relationship, right, that sometimes when we share how something has made us feel, or we share, like, and it can be simple little things like you forgot to do something or something like that, and how that sharing and bringing that before each other actually brings you deeper together and actually gives you an opportunity to feel each other's forgiveness. And I think it's the same when it comes to God. When we share, because he does already know, and he cares for us so deeply. So it's not about, like, trying to make us feel worse or trying to, like, remind us of where we have fallen short. But it's that ability to be able, for us, I think, to feel that relief and to be able to feel that forgiveness and be reminded, that we are forgiven, but also to bring us deeper. Because when you share the things that no one else knows with someone, you do get to become deeper. Okay, so then with asking, which I'm pretty sure for most of us, that one of prayer is like, oh yeah, I've got that one down pat. I know how to ask God for things, or I know how to bring questions to God. But I think what I loved was when Sam was sharing how honest questions are still holy prayers. And that really stood out to me, that when we asking God, even when it's things like, because we don't want to make God feel like a vending machine, but when we come to God to ask, that even our questions of what we're asking God, that is still a holy prayer. Did either of you find that bit with asking challenging, or something that you already knew, or what stood out to you in the asking week?
Well, I guess I knew it in my head, and for those, some of you walked with me, my brother passed away unexpectedly maybe 3 months ago, and the ability to ask and be mad and keep asking and still not really know, there's no clear answer as to why this happened, but to be, given permission by God to be mad at God and talk with him in that way, it was much more personal, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that moved it from my head, maybe into my heart.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Do you know what I love is that we can come to church so often, and we do morning tea together, or we do church services together, and we just think people's lives are going really well and that they've got it all together, and we're the only ones who are struggling with things. But what I love about church is that we have this ability to be able to carry each other's burdens, to come alongside each other, and to allow each other to ask those questions and be like, you can be mad at God right now, and that's okay, and we're okay here. And what I also love is that we want to encourage each other with our walks with God. So ask each other how you're going spiritually. Make sure that we are coming, do that. Be honest with each other and ask those questions. Thank you for sharing that, Eric. For you, Steph, anything around that honest questions or the asking week that you...
Yeah, I mean, over the course of the years, I guess it's sometimes interesting because the sort of questions or the sort of wrestles that we have with God can also be a bit of an indicator of our walk with him. So, and that ability to be honest, so maybe in the past it could be something as like, and I mean, I still do this sometimes, like, the, car spot sort of situation. This year I've really wrestled with, salvation for some of our close friends who've walked away from God and close family members. And, and that's the wrestle that I've had. And and so through like those honest conversations with God and that sort of thing, like while the answer or the response hasn't been what I might hope for in my heart, what God has been teaching me this year is like, I love them more than you ever could. You know, and that's been the process of like really nutting it out with him. Like, you know, in my why, God, like, why would this person who's followed you, you know, like choose not to, or, you know, all those sorts of really big questions, you know, for him to come back to me and say, you know, I love them more than you ever could. Like, and like, he's got this. And it's that whole perspective thing. Like, he's God, I'm not, you know?
Yeah. And so for you guys, what keeps you praying or talking to God when God seems or feels silent? Because there is definitely seasons where we can be praying and doing those three things: adoring, admitting, and asking. Adoring, admitting, and asking. And we can be doing that relentlessly, but then God feels silent. And so how do you keep praying when God feels silent from you?
I've been reflecting a lot about like relationship over ritual, and for those of you who know me well, I'm very much a great, and my friend over here, Mr. Miller,
I know
is
they're
also
very
a great,
similar, actually.
I know. I was like, we're wired very similarly. Very like ritual, like all about discipline and action. Very task orientated, very goal orientated person, or both are. And so, for now, I've forgotten what the question is. That was bound to happen.
That's okay.
I also have a memory of a goldfish.
What keeps you praying when God feels silent?
Oh, thank you. And it's been interesting this year particularly, because we both did emotional healthy spirituality, which was, and then listening to this series, and it's all sort of blurred into one thing, but I feel like a really amazing season and series that God's walked us through. It's actually reorienting my heart that it is about relationship more than the act of doing. But it's like any relationship. Like even if I reflect on my marriage relationship, there are times when the communication doesn't, I don't have the word for it, but just doesn't, you know, it doesn't, like that. And you can be married for a really long time and you have those moments, you know, like 17 years later, and we're in a new season of parenting a teenager. Like it's just a new thing. And you're like, what were you doing? What was I doing, you know? I just think often, like with our relationship with God, it's that same sort of thing. Like you're growing, you're maturing, you know, maybe it's different seasons, maybe it's your own level of awareness. Maybe it's like what Hamy's saying, it's that ability to listen to him. Like it can often be that he's speaking to us in ways that we also can't necessarily, you know, identify or perceive. Yeah. So I think sometimes it's like what's happening for me in that moment, but also, I don't know, I think there's just, if you're trusting in that process, I don't know if I've really answered it.
That's good. No, I get it.
Yeah.
Eric?
I think for me it's, you know, I don't have any other better options.
Yeah.
In other words, what is it? Is it Peter in the scriptures who says, Lord, who else do we have to go to but you? You have the words of life.
Yeah.
And I think about, well, who else could I talk to about these things?
Yeah.
And I might not be hearing back, but that's part of, you know, as Steph said, that's part of relationships, and that's part of faith, I reckon, is one of the reasons I want to put his word into my head first thing is because, you know, I need to hang on to that if I'm not gonna audibly hear from God, then I need to hear from him in some other way. And so I want to plant that stuff in my head.
Which actually leads me to our very first question from the audience. From the congregation, I don't know what to call you, is how, because this one's got 3 likes. By the way, do you know that you can also scan the QR code and it will take you to all of the questions, and you can like the ones that you want answered, and then they come up higher on my screen. So you can play favourites.
Don't choose the really hard ones.
At the moment,
me really nervous.
The best question, one of the highest questions was, Kristyn, don't forget to have a drink of water. So I will do that. Anyway, that's a joke for some people who understand that my lips get really dry when I talk. How do we distinguish between hearing our own voice and hearing God's voice? I'll let you have a moment to think whilst I have a drink of water.
I actually often say when it's not something I would have dreamt up myself, that's how I know. Like I've had these moments when I'm like, if that is not a Steph thought, like that is nowhere far, that is so far from a Steph idea. It has to be God. Yeah.
Maybe similar, sometimes you get the little nudge from the Holy Spirit and it's like, oh, this is uncomfortable. I really don't want to do that. Then I'm pretty sure it's from God.
Yeah. I definitely 100% agree with that. I also think that sometimes God's word talks about how he gives us peace. And I think sometimes when we pray to God and we hear from him, sometimes there is a peace that comes over us when a thought either pops into our spirit or thought into our mind. And I think that sometimes that's like, oh, that must be God. And I also think if it's good and true and wise, then that's also can be God. And God does also give us a beautiful and wonderful and amazing brain. And I do think that is why it's really tricky sometimes to know if it's God or if it's us, because he does give us the ability to think for ourselves. But I'm a big believer in peace. Like I just think that God gives us peace. Doesn't mean that it's comfortable. Like I'm not saying that like peace means that we are comfortable all the time. And so if it's not from God, then it's not going to be uncomfortable. But there is a peace that comes with that. Oh, this must be from God. I don't want to do it, but I actually know deep down that I should do it. And if you're not yet, I'm adding another one to this that is not there. Ooh, anyway. Actually, I'm going to...
while you're doing that, he also gives us community.
Yes.
So I think sometimes, especially in some of those bigger wrestles or questions we might have, if you've got trusted community around you, that you can help, people who will be praying alongside you as well and can confirm things too. Yeah.
Which is why we always kind of talk about, like, share it with someone, share what you're going through. You never know, the person that you're sharing with might have had the same experience as you, might not, might be going through the same thing, might never go through the same thing, but sharing is always really helpful. It's not my saying, and I know I say this often here, but I say to my kids all the time, and they will quote me back on it, a problem shared is a problem halved. And it's so true. When we share what we are struggling with God, when we share, do you think this is from God or not? Like, it's, yeah. There's so many good questions on here. We won't obviously get through them all. I'm going to, as a non-believer or someone who isn't sure, so someone who is checking out Christianity or not yet a believer, is it wrong to ask for a sign or a fix in return for our faith or belief? Ooh. Like meaning like, hey, God, if you're real, do this. Is that wrong?
I mean, I don't know if it's wrong per se, but I don't know that it's probably not the one you want to hinge your future decision on either. Like, yeah. I mean, I prayed some silly prayers like we all have before I was a Christian.
Yeah.
I was at a football stadium in Oklahoma and my team was down by like 50 points. And I'm like, God, if you're there.
That one's a little bit hard. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I understand praying those prayers.
Yeah.
And I think when you're talking about something like faith and you want it to be tangible, to your point, I don't think it's wrong. I understand wanting to have something very tangible to anchor on, but there is also something, and I believe that when you're praying that prayer, it might not be maybe the thing, like to your point, like don't anchor your decision maybe on that, because he might not answer it in the way that you're expecting. And I think that's part of maybe hopefully what's being talked about. Like often it's not what we think it will be. So yes, don't anchor it on that way. I can understand the heart, keep pressing in, and maybe you'll be surprised how, God will show up to you.
Yeah, I would also say God is so desperate to be in relationship with you that I also think that God hears that and does care. And I do know many a times in which people have asked that prayer and God has turned up. They've said, if you are real, then can you, I can't remember the story fully, but let's go with what I'm going to remember. If you are real, then can you send someone to be standing at this vending machine at this time? And sure or not, there is someone standing at that vending machine at that time. And it isn't the whole thing that their faith is dependent on whether or not that person turned up, but just that moment of like, oh, God did hear me and God is real and he does listen. But really, I think the biggest thing is God cares so deeply and wants to be in relationship with you so much that he does hear all of our silly prayers. Man, I pray many silly prayers, like winning. It's definitely one of the prayers that I pray the most, is that I will win. If you don't know that about me, I'm highly competitive and like to win. But I don't come across like that because I want you to all have a sense of like, a false sense of security, and then I'll come in and win.
It's about sports and games, by the way.
Sports and games. Yeah, and particularly my children's sports and games. Anyway, I digressed. But yeah, God cares so deeply that he doesn't hear those prayers and have a little bit of a laugh and think, oh no, couldn't engage. But I do think that shouldn't be the whole thing that we base our faith on. But it could be the thing that helps us go, God cares for me.
I'll just add one thing.
Yes, you may.
This. It's not a unique situation for someone who doesn't yet know Jesus to pray, God, if you're there, do this thing or give me this sign. You know, my core struggle in faith and life is control. You know, I much prefer to be in control and do things on my own, which isn't great. And things I increasingly, as I mature and get older, is I realize that there's so much out of my control. Like the list is so long. And I prayed, this is like, I don't know, 2 years ago, I can't remember the exact timing, but like in our business, like we had to have another contract or we weren't going to make payroll. And it's like, I prayed that prayer like, God, really would love you to come through here. And this contract just appeared out of nowhere.
Wow.
I mean, a conversation I had with a prospective client like 8 months ago. So I was like, oh, cool, you know.
See, that brings me to my, like, this is not one of the questions, but I'm going to follow up from that, and also conscious of time. But, prayer has been one of the biggest journeys that I've been on as a Christian, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that has felt that, because it does sometimes feel like we're praying to someone out there, right? But do you think if you hadn't prayed that prayer, if you hadn't said, oh, God, we really need this, we need this contract to come through. By the way, I know I'm putting you on the spot. Do you think that contract still would have come?
I think so.
Yeah. But do you think that it means that we then honour God and put God in his rightful place because we know that he's still, like either way you would have gone, God is looking out for me. But do you think that changes our perspective of I'm not in control, you are in control, and you've got to work it out, not me?
Yes, and I think it's been so significant for me. I've got about 8 or 9 what I call tent peg moments where God has just so firmly pounded the tent peg in that it wasn't me.
Yeah.
I don't have 100 of these in my life, but I've got 8 or 10 where I'm like, well,
yeah.
It's like when Israel crosses different rivers in the Bible. You know, he wants them to build these rock, what do you call them, cairns, to remind themselves of what God did.
Yeah, so good. So much goodness, hey. We could talk for hours. I've got really good questions, and I want to acknowledge 1 or 2 of them, but we're not going to answer them today. But I think that this will help us work out what we might preach on in the next couple of weeks.
Or you might have to answer it in a next newsletter.
Yes, maybe. But the one, I do want to touch on this one. If I pray for healing, but I don't get healed, what does that mean? And that is such a huge and big question, and I want to say that I see that, and there is so much to unpack on that, because there is both a theology on healing, a theology on God answering prayers, and a theology on faith, all within that one question. And so that's a really tricky one, and I think it will be something that we will address in the next couple of weeks somehow. But if you still have questions about prayer or anything like that, I am going to keep the Slido thing open for the rest of the day, so you can take a photo of it. It was also sent out in the weekly newsletter, so if you don't take a photo and you've got a question later, you can find the link in there. We'll keep it open for the rest of the day, and we will work out a different way in which we answer questions about prayer and about faith. But I hope this has been helpful for you. It's been a stretch for us of us up here. Can we thank both Eric and Steph? I'm sure they didn't get to share everything that they wanted to share this morning. But we're going to come to a time of communion now. And so communion is an opportunity for us each and every week to be able to stop and reflect on what Jesus has done for us so that we can be in a relationship with him, so that we can be in dialogue, in communication with God. And so this morning, as we come and we reflect on what Jesus has done for us, let's be honest. Let's be real in our prayer to him. Let's share what we're feeling, what we're thinking, and the questions that we still and may have. But let's reflect on the beauty that Jesus dying on the cross for us has allowed us to be in relationship with Jesus. And so if you're a follower of Jesus, you do not have to be a member of this church, then we invite you to join with us in communion. So let's do that now. And also, if you've got stuff in your life that you would love prayer for, that you want to have someone come alongside with you and pray with you over situations that are going in your life, or even just to worship and thank God for the situations in your life, then we've got an opportunity now during communion and after communion to be able to receive prayer. Myself and the team will be at the back and we would love to be praying over you. So let's do that now.